A barefoot boy stood in the luxurious penthouse, staring at the impossible safe. The billionaire smirked. "I'll give you $100 million if you open it." His executives burst into laughter. But when the child's small hands touched the cold metal, their mockery froze forever. The morning sun cast golden shadows across the glass towers of Chicago's financial district. But 10-year-old Daniel Hayes saw none of that beauty. His bare feet moved carefully across the scorching summer pavement, each step a calculated dance to avoid the hottest patches of concrete. His worn backpack, held together with safety pins and hope, bounced against his thin shoulders as he approached the building that had haunted his dreams for the past 3 nights. The Thornton Tower. 68 floors of steel, glass, and money. So much money that Daniel couldn't even imagine the numbers. He'd learned about millions in school, back when he still attended regularly. But billions? Trillions? Those were just words that meant more than you'll ever have. Daniel stopped across the street, staring up at the building that seemed to pierce the sky itself. Somewhere up there, on the top floor, was Victor Thornton. The man whose face was on billboards, whose name was whispered with either reverence or fear, whose fortune was so vast that economists used it as a benchmark for measuring wealth inequality. And Daniel was about to walk into his office and make him an offer. The thought was insane. Daniel knew it was insane, but desperation had a way of making insane ideas seem reasonable. His little sister, Maya, was in the hospital 3 blocks away. The doctors said she needed surgery. Expensive surgery that their insurance wouldn't cover, and that would cost more money than Daniel's mother could make in 5 years of working double shifts at the diner. 72 hours, the doctor had said, looking at Daniel's mother with sympathetic eyes that somehow made everything worse. After that, we can't guarantee. He hadn't finished the sentence. He hadn't needed to. Daniel touched his pocket, feeling the small metal object inside. His grandfather's gift, given to him the night before the old man died. "This is special, Danny," his grandfather had whispered, his voice weak but urgent. "When you need it most, you'll understand. Trust your hands. Trust what I taught you." His grandfather had been a locksmith. Not a famous one, not a rich one, but skilled. He taught Daniel things during those long afternoons in his workshop. Things about locks, tumblers, mechanisms, and the art of listening to what metal was trying to tell you. Daniel had thought they were just games, ways for an old man to entertain a curious grandson. Now standing outside the Thornton Tower with his sister dying and no other options, Daniel wondered if those lessons had been preparing him for this exact moment. He took a deep breath and crossed the street. The lobby was everything he'd expected and worse. Marble floors so polished he could see his reflection. Dirty, scared, obviously poor. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. Security guards in sharp uniforms who looked at him the way you'd look at a rat that had wandered in from the alley. "Hey, kid," one of them called out, already moving toward him. "This isn't a public building. You need to leave." "I need to see Mr. Thornton," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. The security guard, his name tag read Morrison, actually laughed. "Right, and I need to see the president. Get out of here before I call the police." "Please," Daniel said, hating how small his voice sounded. "It's important. It's about the safe." Morrison's expression shifted from amusement to confusion. "What safe?" "The one on the 68th floor. The one that's been locked for 3 years. The one that nobody can open." The lobby went quiet. Other security guards had stopped what they were doing. A woman in an expensive business outfit paused mid-step. Even the receptionist looked up from her computer. Morrison's hand moved toward his radio. "How do you know about that?" "Everyone knows about it," Daniel said, which was true. The story had been in the newspapers, on television, even on social media. Victor Thornton's father had died 3 years ago, leaving behind a titanium safe that no one could open. The old man had been paranoid, had used a custom lock that he'd designed himself, and had taken the combination to his grave. Inside the safe, according to Thornton Sr.'s will, was something valuable, though no one knew exactly what. Victor Thornton had hired every expert locksmith in the country. None could open it. He'd offered $1 million reward. No one had claimed it. The safe had become legendary, a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve, a symbol of secrets that would never be revealed. "I can open it," Daniel said. Morrison stared at him for a long moment, then spoke into his radio. "Yeah, we've got a situation in the lobby. Some kid claiming he can open the safe. Should I just throw him out or—" The radio crackled. A woman's voice responded, tinged with curiosity. "Mr. Thornton says bring him up." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Seriously?" "Seriously. Mr. Thornton says he could use the entertainment." Entertainment. The word stung, but Daniel had expected nothing less. Rich people didn't take poor kids seriously. They certainly didn't believe a 10-year-old could solve a puzzle that had stumped professional locksmiths with decades of experience. But Daniel had something those professionals didn't. He had his grandfather's training, his grandfather's tools, and his grandfather's gift for understanding locks in a way that went beyond technical knowledge. The elevator ride to the 68th floor was the longest 90 seconds of Daniel's life. Morrison stood beside him, silent but watchful, probably expecting Daniel to bolt or confess. This was all a joke. Daniel kept his hand in his pocket, touching the small metal tools his grandfather had left him, drawing comfort from their familiar shape. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that made the lobby look modest by comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. Artwork that Daniel recognized from his art history textbook. Actual original paintings worth millions decorated the walls. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. A woman in a professional outfit greeted them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Thornton will see you now. He's in the main conference room with his executive team. They're quite eager to meet you." The way she said eager made Daniel's stomach twist. They weren't eager to see if he could open the safe. They were eager to watch him fail, to laugh at the poor kid who thought he could do something impressive. Daniel followed her through double doors into a conference room that could have held 50 people. Currently it held 7. 6 men in expensive suits stood around a massive table, and at the head of that table, lounging in a leather chair like a king on his throne, was Victor Thornton himself. He was 43 years old but looked younger, with the kind of ageless appearance that came from personal trainers, private chefs, and cosmetic procedures that cost more than cars. His hair was perfectly styled, his suit probably cost more than Daniel's mother made in a month, and his smile was sharp enough to cut. Well, Victor said, his voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "Morrison tells me we have a young entrepreneur here, someone who thinks he can succeed where the best locksmiths in the country have failed." The executives around the table chuckled. One of them, a man with silver hair and cold eyes, actually snapped a photo of Daniel on his phone. "What's your name, kid?" Victor asked. "Daniel. Daniel Hayes." "Daniel Hayes," Victor repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "And how old are you, Daniel?" 10. More laughter. Victor's smile grew wider. 10 years old. Fascinating. Tell me, Daniel, what makes you think you can open a safe that has defeated experts with 30, 40 years of experience? Daniel wanted to explain about his grandfather, about the lessons, about the special understanding of locks that had been passed down. But looking at Victor's mocking expression and the amused faces of his executives, Daniel knew that explanations would only invite more ridicule. "I just can," Daniel said simply. "He just can," Victor repeated, looking at his executives with exaggerated amazement. "Gentlemen, we have a prodigy in our midst. A 10-year-old with dirty feet," and he leaned forward, studying Daniel more closely. "Is that a safety pin holding your backpack together?" "Yes, sir." "Incredible," Victor said, though his tone suggested he found nothing admirable about it. "You know what, Daniel Hayes? I'm in a generous mood today. I'm going to make you an offer." He stood up, walking around the table with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. When he reached the far wall, he pressed a button, and a section of the wood paneling slid aside to reveal what Daniel had come to see. The safe. It was smaller than Daniel had expected, maybe 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, but it radiated an aura of impossibility. The titanium surface was unmarked, unblemished, perfect. The dial mechanism was unlike anything Daniel had seen in his grandfather's workshop or in the books he'd studied. It was custom-made, unique, designed by a paranoid old man who'd wanted to ensure his secrets stayed secret. "Here's my offer," Victor said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality as he addressed both Daniel and his executives. "If you can open this safe, I will give you $100 million. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Daniel's mind couldn't even process it. $100 million. Maya's surgery would cost $300,000. That would leave $99,700,000. Enough to pay off their apartment, to get his mother out of the diner, to ensure Maya would have everything she needed for the rest of her life. However, Victor continued, his smile sharpening. When you fail, and you will fail, you have to do something for me. What? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You have to stand right here in front of all these gentlemen and admit that you're just a poor kid with delusions of grandeur, that you wasted everyone's time with your ridiculous claim, that people like you should know your place and not bother people like us with your fantasies. The cruelty of the offer was stunning. Victor wasn't just offering money, he was offering humiliation. He wanted to crush this poor kid's spirit, to teach him a lesson about staying in his lane, about not reaching above his station. The executives were watching Daniel with predatory interest now, like sharks circling wounded prey. They wanted to see him accept, wanted to watch him fail, wanted to witness the moment when hope died in his eyes. Daniel thought about Maya in the hospital bed, her small hand holding their mother's, her voice asking if she was going to die. He thought about his mother crying in the bathroom when she thought no one could hear, about the eviction notice on their apartment door, about the way poverty had slowly strangled every dream their family had ever had. He thought about his grandfather's words. Trust your hands, Danny. Trust what I taught you. Okay, Daniel said. I accept. Victor's grin was triumphant. Excellent. Gentlemen, gather around. This is going to be entertaining. The executives formed a semicircle around the safe, phones out, ready to record the moment. Victor stepped back, gesturing to the safe like a game show host revealing a prize. It's all yours, Daniel Hayes. Show us what you've got. Daniel approached the safe on legs that trembled but held. His bare feet were silent on the expensive carpet. His hands, small, dirty, calloused from work no 10-year-old should have to do, reached out toward the cold titanium surface. The moment his fingers touched the dial, something happened. Daniel couldn't explain it, couldn't put it into words that made sense. But he felt something, a connection, a whisper of understanding, like the safe was speaking to him in a language only he could hear. His grandfather had tried to explain this feeling once, had called it listening with your fingertips, but Daniel had never fully understood until now. He closed his eyes, blocking out Victor's mocking smile and the executives' cameras. He blocked out Maya in the hospital, and his mother's tears, and the crushing weight of poverty that had defined his entire life. There was only Daniel and the safe, and the conversation happening between his fingers and the metal beneath them. His right hand moved to the dial, not quickly, not with the confidence of someone who knew the combination. Slowly, carefully, feeling for something he couldn't name but would recognize when he found it. The room had gone quiet. Even Victor had stopped smirking, watching with curiosity as Daniel's fingers moved with strange certainty across the dial. Daniel turned the dial right, stopped, turned it left, stopped, right again, but only slightly, left, right, left. This is ridiculous, one of the executives muttered. The kid's just guessing. Shh, Victor said, and there was something new in his voice. Not mockery anymore, but something else. Something that might have been uncertainty. Daniel's fingers continued their dance. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Every lock has a heartbeat, Danny. You just have to learn to feel it. Daniel felt it now. The heartbeat of the safe, the rhythm of the mechanism, the pattern that only existed in the spaces between the sounds and the silences. He turned the dial one final time and heard a click. The sound was small, almost inaudible, but in the absolute silence of the conference room, it sounded like thunder. Daniel's eyes opened. His hands were shaking. He looked at Victor Thornton, whose expression had frozen in a way that would have been comical if the moment weren't so serious. I think, Daniel's voice cracked. I think it's unlocked. That's impossible, Victor whispered. But even as he said it, Daniel reached for the safe's handle. It moved smoothly, easily, like it had been waiting 3 years for exactly this moment. The safe door swung open, and inside, illuminated by the afternoon sun streaming through the conference room windows, was something that made every person in the room gasp. The safe wasn't filled with money or gold or bearer bonds. or any of the valuable things everyone had imagined. It was filled with letters, hundreds of letters in neat stacks, each envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. Victor Thornton stepped forward, his face pale, his hands trembling as he reached for the top envelope. He turned it over, and Daniel could see the writing on the front. To my son, Victor, to be opened on the day someone proves that impossible things can still happen. The billionaire's mask cracked. His hands shook as he opened the envelope and began to read. And as he read, tears started falling down his face. Real tears. The kind that couldn't be faked or controlled. The room stayed silent as Victor read. When he finished, he looked at Daniel with an expression completely different from the mocking superiority of 10 minutes ago. "How did you do it?" Victor asked, his voice rough with emotion. "How did a 10-year-old kid open a safe that defeated every expert in the country?" Daniel thought about explaining, about his grandfather, and the lessons and the special gift for understanding locks. But then he realized that the answer was simpler and more profound than any of that. "Because I had to," Daniel said. "Because my sister is dying, and I needed to do something impossible to save her." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, and the ripples they created would change everything. The silence in the conference room stretched like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Victor Thornton stood frozen, the letter from his father still trembling in his hands, tears cutting clean tracks down his carefully composed face. Around him, his executives shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to process seeing their invincible CEO reduced to raw emotion by words written years ago. Daniel remained by the safe, his small frame dwarfed by the massive furniture and towering windows. His bare feet pressed against the plush carpet, grounding him in a moment that felt increasingly surreal. He'd done it. He'd actually opened the safe. $100 million. Maya's surgery. Their mother's freedom from endless work. A future that didn't taste like fear and desperation. But looking at Victor's face, at the vulnerability bleeding through his billion-dollar armor, Daniel felt something unexpected stirring in his chest. Not triumph, not even relief. Something closer to recognition. Like seeing his own pain reflected in someone he'd assumed was incapable of feeling it. "Your sister is dying?" Victor finally spoke, his voice stripped of its earlier mockery. He carefully placed the letter on the conference table, his hands moving with the delicate care of someone handling something infinitely precious. "What's wrong with her?" "Heart condition," Daniel said quietly. "She needs surgery. The doctors say she has days, maybe a week. My mom works at Miller's Diner double shifts, but the insurance won't cover it. The hospital wants $300,000 before they'll schedule the operation." One of the executives, the one with silver hair who'd taken Daniel's photo earlier, made a dismissive sound. $300,000? That's nothing. You could have just asked for help instead of pulling this stunt. "Enough, Gerald." Victor cut him off sharply, still staring at Daniel with an expression the boy couldn't quite read. "When you say days, how many days exactly?" "The doctor said 72 hours. That was yesterday morning." Victor pulled out his phone with sudden urgency, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "Janet, get Dr. Reeves on the line. Yes, I know he's in surgery. I don't care. Pull him out. This is priority alpha." He paused, listening. "St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. Patient named Maya Hayes. I want a full team assembled within the hour. Money is not an object. Yes, I'll hold." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "What are you doing?" "Saving your sister's life," Victor said simply, then returned his attention to the phone. "Marcus?" "Yes, it's Thornton. I need you to authorize an emergency medical procedure. St. Catherine's. 8-year-old patient, cardiac surgery. Bill it to my personal account, and add a 0 to whatever they quote you. I want their absolute best." Another pause. "I don't care if it's unconventional. Make it happen." The executives exchanged glances, a silent conversation happening in raised eyebrows and subtle gestures. Daniel recognized that look. He'd seen it enough times when adults talked about his family. They thought Victor was being impulsive, emotional, making decisions with his heart instead of his head. They thought he'd regret this later. But Daniel saw something else in Victor's eyes. Something raw and wounded that had been opened by those letters in the safe.